Right, hello and welcome to the Planning Hub, and today we are going to be talking all things wedding cakes. And joining us today is Whitewed approved Sarah Hodgson of Simplicity Cakes by Sarah. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
That's all right. So, Sarah has 5 of her top tips on wedding cake practicalities and things to consider. So I think we're going to start with ideas and inspiration.
We are. So I would say probably the most important thing to start with when you go to your cake designer is to get some ideas.
Definitely.
It can be anything from jewellery, dresses, invitations, they're traditional, the wacky wallpaper. I have designed a cake based on wallpaper once.
Okay. Whatever.
If it works, anything that is going to just give your designer an idea of the direction that you're going, so they can come forward and maybe suggest other things as well, but at least they know what kind of route you're taking. And also when you're doing that, make sure you take your budget with you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I know some people are a bit cagey about sharing their budget, but at the same time, it means that the designer can kind of give you ideas which are
realistic. Yeah.
Exactly. Sugar flowers, things like that are beautiful, but they will add a lot of cost onto your cake because they take a really long time. So they can give you things which are going to fit where you're aiming for.
Good. And I think a lot of the time with regards to budget is I don't think people realise quite how long a wedding cake takes. Because I get a lot of comments as a wedding planner when people say to me, oh, the cake's so expensive and all it is a cake. Oh my. They have no idea how many hours and time and sourcing and preparation, and even in weather like this, we have a lovely day this afternoon. That is a nightmare where a cake designer is concerned.
Yeah. Well,
so
even things like a single sugar flower, if you're getting a large peony, some of the really popular at the moment, some of those can have 60 petals on them, and every one of those petals has to be cut, rolled, shaped, dried, dusted, and then eventually all put together in a flower. So, and that takes really, really
yeah, so do bear that in mind. So whilst you might go to a cake designer with £150, it's not realistic. You're going to need a bit more than that. But so yeah, I agree. Having a bit of a proper budget in mind, you can then tailor your design to suit that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 1. So number 2.
Number 2, I would say, no matter what the budget is of your cake, think about how you're going to present it. So whether you had a slightly smaller budget or whether you've gone all out and just got something awesome, how you present that cake is going to make a big difference. So don't stick it in a corner where no one can see it. Get a stand, be that from the venue that they might probably provide one for you already, or come to your designer, they have some, if not lots of different places hiding them out. Think of props, just even if it's just your bridal bouquet, that can go next to it and really make a difference. And anything else that just fits in with the theme that can really take the cake from simple and nice to like.
Well, also to make it part of the theme and the day.
Exactly, integrate it.
Absolutely.
And from a general point of view, if you can think about where you're putting your cake, try to avoid putting it in front of the fire extinguishers and the fire exit signs and things like that. And while from our point of view it doesn't make a big difference, your photographer will be very, very grateful afterwards.
Yes, because then there's no photoshopping required. Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so number 3.
Third thing, which I think is forgotten a lot, is thinking about practicalities of your cake. So how you're going to serve it, where you're going to serve it, and when you're going to serve it. Once your guests have just had a 5-course meal, they're not really going to be very hungry anymore. At the same time, if you wait until really late in the evening, they're maybe a little bit merry and just want to dance a bit, so at the same time, they're not going to be very interested in cake. So I would often recommend serving it as dessert for your evening buffet, which tends to work out quite well. When the cake is served, think about where you're going to put it, make sure people know where it is, be that a signpost saying cake this way, or anything. If you've got a sweet buffet, keep it with that perhaps. And also provide things for people to eat it off.
Most helpful.
It sounds silly, but a cake slice might be 4.5 inches high, tall, and they're quite small, and everyone's dressed in their really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice.
And then
clothes.
just a napkin doesn't do it.
Just a napkin doesn't do it. Plates, little knives, forks are ideal, but at least a plate so they don't have to spill buttercream down the top.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also that scenario of having plenty of napkins there so that if people they don't necessarily want to have it straight away, they can wrap it up and take it away in their handbag so they can enjoy it the next day.
You could even maybe get, if that was something that you thought was going to happen, you could always get little kind of like takeaway boxes, but nicer versions. They would provide them. But either way, sometimes people have a lot of leftovers, sometimes they won't have many at all. That all really comes down to your guest, basically, and how much cake you like to eat.
Yeah.
And as well where and when you're going to serve it. So you want to have enough for everyone, but maybe try not to go too big.
Sure, and I think also one of the things that we always ask is that, is there any part of the cake that they would like to save? Because sometimes we've had it where they have the traditional fruit tier, which may be saved for a later christening, for example, or even a party the following week or the next day, or when they return, etc., etc. So make sure that your caterers or the hotel, they know exactly what it is that you want to keep and supply some Tupperware boxes for that purpose.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I would add to that as well, when you've had, a lot of the time when I have cakes, each tier will be a different flavour.
Sure.
And I've been to venues sometimes that said, right, we'll start with cutting the bottom 2 tiers or the top 2 tiers. I said, okay, that's great, but
you're missing out.
You're missing out on a tier. So yeah, definitely have that discussion with the venue beforehand and make sure they know what you want tracking it.
Absolutely. Okay, next.
Next one is probably a little bit more boring. It's basically doing your homework.
Yeah.
So making sure that before you go to a designer, you have a look at their work.
Mm-hmm.
Be it the style that, if it's the style that you like, whether they work in a medium that you like. So if they do just buttercream work, for example, they probably aren't going to be all that practiced at things like royal icing.
Mm-hmm.
So find that out, make sure that they can do your work. Obviously check the quality of the work, check the credentials. Whitewed is a great place to go for that.
They're all
Shout out to
Whitewed.
And also check things like their timescales, when their diary's open. A lot of popular dates will fill up early.
Yeah, sure.
I've regularly had people booking up 18 months in advance.
Yeah.
And that, from what I've heard, is nothing normal, nothing
No.
abnormal, sorry.
No, absolutely.
So that definitely make sure what kind of timescales they need. By all means, then give them a call, but it's probably best to check that first because it's otherwise a waste of your time.
Well, it is, absolutely. And I think it's that tasting as well, because so often it does happen, unfortunately. You either have sometimes a great tasting cake and a bad looking one, or vice versa. So what you need to make sure is that you've got a great tasting cake and a great looking one, and that's really, really key. Definitely. Okay, and finally,
last one actually is very appropriate considering the temperature in this room.
yes, it is rather warm today.
I would say, when you go to your designer, they will give you a design for, normally they'll design for the venue, so they'll take into account things like the height of the ceilings, the decor, if it's really, really vintage, if it's really, really modern, and go with that. But you also need to think about the kind of practicalities, temperature. If a cake is really, really hot, if the venue is going to get hot,
like a marquee, for example.
Marquees, orangeries,
Sure.
beautiful, but the temperature will rise quickly, and buttercream is kind of made of butter, and it will literally melt. So you just have to, there are ways around it, but you definitely have to be aware of it. And if you're going to have height of summer wedding in a giant greenhouse, then don't go with buttercream.
No, definitely. And I think it's that whole thing of actually taking the advice of your cake designer as well, because as much as we have an idea in our mind, seen something on Pinterest and that is what we're having, it doesn't always work. So that's really important too.
If you're willing to, in that kind of situation, you could come up with, I hate to bring in the artificial tiers, but you could perhaps go with a faux cake and decorate it with buttercream or something like that. That will be more stable, so that's more likely to hold up better. So you'll have the look of the cake that you want.
Absolutely.
And the actual edible parts of cake will be in the back to feed your guests so they can enjoy later. But you don't have to worry about them melting.
Absolutely, and I think also along the side of the practicalities, we were saying about marquees, is the issue of where you envisage your cake table to be might not be the most sturdy. So don't be disappointed if on your arrival it's not in exactly the location that perhaps you would want it to be, because the cake designer has said, no, this is not safe, it's going there. So that's key as well.
Wobbles, I take a spirit level with me to
Yeah,
every
absolutely.
venue.
Absolutely.
I get some funny looks from people when the table is wobbling. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I can't use that table,
No.
or I need the napkin method or anything. That table has got to be sturdy.
Absolutely.
And marquees, they're the worst.
I
Dance
know.
floors.
I know.
Looking forward to it. I've got a marquee wedding this weekend.
Oh, that'll be nice for you. Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, excellent top tips. Thank you so much for joining us,
welcome.
Sarah.
Thank you
So
for
as
having
we say, Simplicity Cakes by Sarah, and her link is just underneath this video. Thank you for joining